بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم
الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونتوب إليه ونعوذ به تعالى من شرور أنفسنا وسيئات أعمالنا. من يهد الله فهو المهتدي ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدًا عبده ورسوله أرسله بالهدى ودين الحق ليظهره على الدين كله ولو كره الكافرون صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا.
It's 14 hours.
Most respected viewers, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Today we are on the 21st episode of our presentation on thematic study of the Quran. The 21st episode. In the last episode, the 20th episode, in continuation with the discussion of creation, the concept of creation in the Quran, in continuation with the discussion on that, we took up the topic or the theme, the purpose of life, in episode 19, and also we also discussed the next thing that is related to the purpose of life, that is responsibility and accountability. That is to say that since we've been created for a purpose, then we would be held responsible against the purpose for which we were created. That is, we will be held to ransom in relation to the purpose of our creation. We would be asked how we observed or how we work towards achieving that purpose, or towards making sure that we lived in accordance to that purpose. That is what explains responsibility. And against responsibility, we will render accountability. And therefore, in the 20th episode, we talked on responsibility and accountability in life. Now, when will this accountability reckoning take place? And where shall it take place? This is what we are going to discuss in this episode. In this regard, our subject matter of discussion in this episode is the concept of resurrection and life after death in the Quran. What is the Quranic outlook? What is the Quranic view about resurrection and life after death? This discussion would be made in different perspectives and in different dimensions. Therefore, it may not be possible, perhaps, to finish addressing this particular subject matter in this one episode. Maybe we may have to continue discussing it in the next episode by God's grace, inshallah. That is in the 22nd episode. Now, discussion about resurrection, life after death. Before we present the Quranic perspective on life after death, it may be pertinent perhaps to discuss some of the other views or viewpoints of other world views or other religions on the issue of resurrection and life after death. And thereupon, we now present the Quranic viewpoint on life after death and resurrection. Now, there is the atheistic viewpoint on resurrection. And the atheistic viewpoint on resurrection is not different from the pre-Islamic view of the Arabs. That is the Jahiliyyah view, the viewpoint of the Arabs regarding resurrection is the same as the atheistic view. Today's atheists, just like the pre-Islamic Arabian time, reject resurrection, that we will not be resurrected, we will not be raised up again after we die. The Quran addresses this in very, very critical manner. We will discuss it later. So even modern atheists have almost the same view, like the view of the Arabs before Islam. Because the Arabs were saying, أَإِذَا كُنَّا عِظَامًا وَرُفَاتًا أَإِنَّا لَمَبْعُوثُونَ وَأَإِذَا كُنَّا عِظَامًا نَخِرًا قَالُوا تِلْكَ إِذًا كَرَّةٌ خَاسِرَةٌ. What? Shall we be brought back to life again? Shall we be resurrected after death? After we must have decayed and decomposed, that we shall be, we shall be raised again? No, this is an impossible return. They say it's not possible. Modern atheist that is backed by modern godless science. Modern godless science has the same view, because a scientific, as far as modern science is concerned, since modern science doesn't believe in God, let it be very clear, modern science does not believe in God. But you may find a scientist that may believe in God. You may find a Muslim scientist, he believes in God. The Muslim scientist believes in God. You may find a Christian scientist. The Christian scientist believes in God. But his science doesn't believe in God. Because science is based on the realist philosophy, the materialist philosophy, that the only real existence is matter. Matter is the only real existence. Anything whose existence cannot be established within the materialist realm, within the realist realm, cannot be conceived to be existing. That thing is a myth, as far as modern science is concerned. That is to say, anything whose existence you cannot establish with your five senses. You cannot see it, you cannot hear it, you cannot taste it, you cannot smell it, you cannot feel it, then that thing is not real. It's a myth, it's not a reality, as far as modern science is concerned. It is on the basis of this realist philosophy, it is on the basis of this realist, materialist worldview, that science Science does not believe in God. Modern science, of course, we're going to come and discuss Islamic science later. Inshallah, tabaraka wa ta'ala. It shall be one of the themes we will discuss in some of our upcoming episodes. We'll discuss Islam and science, or Islamic science, or Quran and science. We're going to discuss the Quran and science. We will see that science really has a place in the Quran, but we're today discussing modern science that is rooted in the modernist philosophy. Modernism or modernity is a worldview that excludes God. It's a worldview that doesn't believe in God. Either it doesn't believe in God, it totally rejects God, that is atheism, or whether it is skeptical about God, that is agnosticism. That whether God exists or he doesn't exist, it doesn't matter, he doesn't care. That is an agnostic. An atheist completely rejects the existence of God because God's existence cannot be established, according to them, cannot be established by any of the five senses. Although they believe that air exists, of course they will say, because when the wind blows, you feel the air, so air exists. Now, as far as this philosophy is concerned, the atheistic philosophy, since God does not exist, it therefore does not even believe that there will be any God in any life after death that will determine the destiny of people as to whether they will be rewarded or they will be punished. Therefore, as far as this, worldview is concerned, there shall be no life after death. Just like the pre-Islamic Arabs were rejecting that if we just die, we shall not be brought back to another life again. In hiya illa hayatuna dunya namutu wa nahya wa ma nahnu bimab'uthin. It's nothing but our life in this world. We just live and die, and we shall not be resurrected. Or in another verse, وَمَا يُهْلِكُنَا إِلَّا الدَّهَرِ. Nothing would perish us except time. So they don't believe in God. So a modern scientist, or in modern science, even in elementary science, a modern science, a modern atheist will explain to you that, look, if we die, we decay and we decompose. We decay and we decompose. And by decaying and decomposing, we would have gone into, chemical change. And in elementary science, in basic science, we are taught about the differences between physical change and chemical change. We are told in elementary science that when an element undergoes physical change, it's possible to revive it to its original form. But when it undergoes chemical change, it's impossible to reverse it to its original form. So in this regard, if we die and we decay and decompose, we go into a form of chemical change. It's not physical change. Physical change is exemplified with the solidification of water into ice. That is turning water into an ice block. That when you put liquid water in a freezer or in a refrigerator, now it undergoes physical change when it turns from liquid to solid ice. It undergoes physical change. Since it is physical change, when you withdraw the condition that makes it transform from liquid to solid, then it will now revert to its original form. That is, the ice will melt down, and then it will go back to liquid. That is physical change. But chemical change is irreversible, and it is exemplified, for example, when you take a piece of paper, and you burn it, and the paper turns into ashes, that is a form of chemical change. You cannot gather the ashes and turn it back to paper. Unlike when an ice block can be turned back into liquid. It can be turned back into liquid, which is physical change. So they say, when we die and we decay and decompose, we would have gone into chemical change, just like this paper that is burnt. If you burn a paper, you have, the paper undergoes chemical change when it turns into ashes. Or when you get firewood or cornstalk, for example, and you burn it, it becomes ash. So from ash you cannot take it back to wood, or from ash you cannot take it back to paper. So they say, to this extent, it's a myth according to modern science and according to modern atheism. It's a myth. The only difference between the pre-Islamic Arabian conception is because somehow the modern atheist can bring a scientific explanation to it. But as far as the pre-Islamic Arabs were concerned, they would say, أَإِذَا كُنَّا عِظَامًا نَخِرَةً. What? You say we will be brought back to life when we decay and decompose, when our bones decay and decompose, and they stop at that. But an atheist today would give he would give a scientific explanation by saying, when we die and we decay and decompose, we would have gone into a form of chemical change, and chemical change cannot be reversed. So it's a myth to think that when you burn a paper and it turns into ashes, that you can bring it back to paper. That is within the modernist, godless thinking about death and resurrection. We will address this squarely and critically with a number of verses in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala presents very rational, critical argument, just so that, for the purposes, so that we don't go beyond this, although we're going to talk about other worldviews, the viewpoints of other worldviews regarding resurrection and life after death. But just before that, Allah says, وَهُوَ الَّذِي يَبْدَأُ الْخَلْقَ ثُمَّ يُعِيدُ وَهُوَ أَهْوَنُ عَلَيْهِ. He it is that initiates creation. He it is that initiates it. Are you following? He initiates it. ثُمَّ يُعِيدُ. And he can repeat it. Which one is difficult? Like he says at the end of Surah Yasin, أَوَلَمْ يَرَ الْإِنسَانُ أَنَّا خَلَقْنَاهُ مِن نُطْفَةٍ أَنَّمَا خَلَقْنَاهُ مِن نُطْفَةٍ فَإِذَا هُوَ خَصِيمٌ مُبِينٌ وَضَرَبَ لَنَا مَثَلًا وَنَسِيَ خَلْقَهُ قَالَ مَنْ يُحْيِي الْعِظَامَ وَهِيَ رَمِيمٌ قُلْ يُحْيِيهَا الَّذِي أَنْشَأَهَا أَوَّلَ مَرَّةٍ وَهُوَ بِكُلِّ خَلْقٍ عَلِيمٌ. Allah says, doesn't man see that we created him from a drop of sperm? And man has turned up to be so controversial and argumentative. Man even goes on to set parables and examples against us. He forgets how he was created. Man has forgotten how he was created. And he says, who is it that can revive bones after they have decayed and decomposed? Just like the modern atheists will tell you, how would it be possible to bring back bones that have decayed and have gone into chemical change. But Allah answers the modern atheist. It's as though this verse has just been revealed to the modern world. Allah says, "Qul," say to them, "Yuhyiha alladhi ansha'aha awwala marra." He that originated the creation of the bones, he originated their creation. That is to say, he brought them from nothing. They were not existing before. And he originated their creation. He brought them from nothing. Say to them, he that brought them from nothing, he that originated their creation, is the one that shall bring them back, that shall resurrect them. قُلْ يُحْيِيهَا الَّذِي أَنْشَأَهَا أَوَّلَ مَرَّةٍ. He that created them in the first instance, when they never existed, is the one that can bring them back. Which one is more difficult? To originate something from non-existence, or to bring back something that its rudiments or its remnants are available? You just put together the remnants of that thing to bring it back. Is certainly much easier to do the second one. So, but we will come to discuss this much more elaborately later. But I'm just beginning to present different worldviews and viewpoints regarding life after death. We've just presented the pre-Arabian conception, the pre-Islamic Arabian conception of life after death. They totally reject life after death. In here, illa hayatuna dunya namutu wa nahya wa ma nahnu bimab'uthin. It's nothing but our life in this world. We just live and perish in this world, and we shall not be resurrected. And this goes together. It agrees with modern atheist perspective about life after death. Now, there are other different perspectives. The Christians and the Jews, because they believe in heavenly scriptures, they also believe that there shall be life after death. But there are differences in conception. There are certain differences in conception between the Islamic view, the Quranic view of resurrection, and the Christian view. And even the Christian view of resurrection differs in accordance to denominations. The Catholics have a different view about resurrection and life after death. Not completely diametrically opposed, but there are some differences among the denominations. And the same thing regarding the Jews. The Jews before also, because they also believe in scriptures, heavenly scriptures, believe that we shall be raised after death. What about the Buddhists? The Buddhists and the Hinduists, in Buddhism and Hinduism, they don't believe that there shall be another life after death. What they believe is that we reincarnate. We reincarnate. That is to say, when a person dies, he reincarnates and he is brought back to this life. He's brought back to this life, in a different place completely. For example, you die in Nigeria, then you will reincarnate, and you will continue you will be brought back to life in China, for example, and you will completely forget that you once lived in Nigeria. Are you following? That you completely forget. In Hinduism, there is what they call the nirvana. The nirvana is a kind of buffer, a sort of some kind of some interval between your death and then your reincarnation, and that within that period the soul goes into some form of suffering, and then once it emancipates from the nirvana, and then it reincarnates in another form. In Hinduism, sometimes they believe that you may not necessarily, when you die, you may not necessarily reincarnate in human form. You may reincarnate in animal form. So you may die, you may live as a human person, for example, here in Nigeria, and you may reincarnate in Arizona, for example, or in another world, in China, or in Japan, or in Arabia, that you reincarnate as a snake, or you may reincarnate as a lion, or you may even reincarnate as a human being. As far as they are concerned, this means that this world shall not come to an end. Life is ad infinitum. I mean, this world is eternal, and living beings will just continue to be reincarnating and reincarnating, either in different human forms or in different, forms. Like one may even reincarnate into a cockroach, for example, or you may reincarnate into a mosquito, for example. This is their belief. This is also addressed. I mean, we shall also address this. Again, there is a group of philosophers who also believe that we shall reincarnate. I mean, some philosophers also believe in reincarnation. Others believe that, yes, there will be life after death, but then it is going to be a virtual life, not a physical life. That although we shall be resurrected, but we are not going to resurrect in our own human physical body. It's only our souls that shall reincarnate, and therefore punishment in hellfire or enjoyment and pleasure in paradise would only be with the soul. That it is only, even when they talk about punishment in hellfire, it is only the souls that will be punished in hellfire. And when they talk about enjoyment in paradise, it is only the souls that shall enjoy in paradise. We're going to address all these perspectives and present the Quranic perspective and how the Quran addresses all these issues. But at this point, we have to stop. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله العظيم لي ولكم. بارك الله لي ولكم في القرآن العظيم ونفعني وإياكم بما فيه من الآيات والذكر الحكيم والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وسبحانك اللهم لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العزيز الحكيم والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.